Hi, I'm Ken Howard, and welcome to the Gay Therapy LA podcast. On today's episode, I would like to share with you some tips on how gay men can cope with the breakup of a friendship. So, as a gay male therapist with over 27 years of experience now, I've seen many clients have to deal with how interpersonal relationships in their lives change over time. Much of the time, I help guys with dating and romantic and domestic relationship issues, but lately I've had some clients been working with me on handling changes in platonic relationships with their buddies and working with me on how friendships start, how they're maintained, and even how they end. The end of a friendship, or at least its drastic reduction in prominence in our lives, is a sad occasion, and clients go through a grief and mourning process that is almost like experiencing a death as they process the loss in therapy. The causes of the end or reduction of a friendship can be many: getting partnered or married, moving away to a different city, changing jobs, moving domiciles, having a child, experiencing an illness or disability, or even just growing apart in terms of recreational interests and values. I even think socioeconomic differences can affect it, where one person experiences class mobility by earning more and doing things that people with a lot of money do, and their friend can't keep up or move in the same circles, go to the same restaurants, or take the same weekend trips. Whatever the cause, acknowledging the end of a friendship and coming to terms with it is a psychological process that requires emotional coping. Here are some examples based on some real-life client scenarios that have been, altered a little bit to protect their confidentiality so that you don't, recognize these cases. Oh, that's my best friend. Let's talk about several today. Number one is Shawn, and Shawn had a best friend, Tony, from their college days. They moved to LA at about the same time to pursue jobs in the entertainment industry. They became roommates, and despite Shawn being gay and Tony being straight, they were close friends who bonded over a love of movies and comics. But for a couple of years, they had a broad circle of friends and socialized together with others often. But Tony eventually got a girlfriend and then became engaged and married to her and moved out of state to leave the frustrating entertainment industry behind and settle down with his new wife in a place with a lower cost of living. Shawn was then left to cope with his best friend, roommate, and their associated circle of friends, all kind of dissolving. Number two, David, Eric, and Bryan were gay best friends who played on a gay softball team together. While softball was what it was that brought them together, they were friends off the field too. They hung out as the single boys, telling stories of their respective nightmare dates and glad to have each other even if they didn't have partners. But then Bryan got a boyfriend, and David and Eric reacted not really with joy that Bryan had found love, but with resentment that Bryan had changed the rules and dynamics of the group. Bryan started neglecting David and Eric to some degree, busy with the new boyfriend, but they also started excluding Bryan from activities, as if to punish him or perhaps out of jealousy that Bryan had found love when they had not. Bryan felt rejected by his two so-called best friends and also confused about why it was happening. Here's a third one. Ben, who was gay, had a straight female best friend, Cassie, when they met at work years before. They each moved on to different jobs, but socialized together often, even using each other as a substitute, really, for having a partner, kind of like Will and Grace. But over time, Ben noticed that Cassie was avoiding him, not returning calls or texts, and putting a chill on their previously constant friendship. Ben was left wondering why, and asked in therapy whether to confront Cassie on her mysterious silence, which seemed like a passive-aggressive distancing or even punishment for a crime Ben didn't even know he had committed. So let's look at each of these scenarios and why and how friendships sometimes end. With number one, Shawn and Tony, it was about life transitions. When they had met in their early 20s, being single and being buddies out to make their way in life, kind of was the rule of the day. But as they passed 30, it was only normal for each of them that their nesting instincts might kick in, going through the developmental phases of life. One of the biggest differences overall between people in their 20s, particularly gay men, and in their 30s is that the 20s are marked by doing things in general in packs of groups of friends. And the 30s on up is more about nesting, domestic relationships, furthering your career with both increasing personal and professional responsibilities. While Shawn had to cope with the loss of Tony, who married the girl, and work to make new friends, he had to accept that the Tony of 20 and the Tony of 30 were essentially different people. Tony had grown up and started his own family, starting with his wife, and Shawn could do the same with a partner or husband. This breakup was about the developmental and life changes that sometimes require that two friends be less close. While they still could call or visit, every day in their 30s just became different, and that's how life works, as you go through these very predictable developmental periods, usually associated with each decade of life. So, what's the advice on this? Here's my advice. Accept the phase of life changes that happen with everyone. Allow for different friends to take precedent at different times in your life, and be happy for your friends when life changes are good, even if that takes them away from you. Try to spend time with different kinds of people in various circles or settings to diversify what social workers like me call your social support system. It's like the spokes of a wheel that keep the wheel turning. Your social support system are the people that support you and keep you from living in an isolated context. Balance between keeping in touch with friends who are far away through Skype or FaceTime or social media with friends that you keep in touch with through in-person outings locally, going to a meal, going to a concert, going to the movies, whatever. And, maybe meeting halfway for weekend getaways sometimes. Let's look at that second case, the three gay friends, David, Bryan, and Eric. Sometimes we need to clarify who our friends really are. If people are friends when we're in the closet, but dump us when we come out, then they weren't really friends. If people like us when we're single, but avoid us when we become partners, then they weren't really friends. Friends don't indulge jealousies or take out their frustrations about life on their friends, whether it's getting a partner, having a prestigious or lucrative job, or having some other fortunate event. This breakup was about what friendships are built on and the importance of friends supporting each other even as life changes over time, when we become partnered or have children or have increasingly demanding careers. Good friends are happy for one another in good times and comfort one another in bad times. Good friends also find the time to get together, even if they're partnered or even if they have a busy job. So here's my advice, if you have a situation like that or you know of one. Don't ignore your platonic friends when you get a boyfriend or partner. Your new boyfriend will understand that not all of your leisure time needs to be spent with him. But speak up when friends do things that undermine or puzzle you. Your friends don't need to agree with everything you say, but they also shouldn't devalue or dismiss your feelings. They should validate your right to your own perspective, even if they need to clarify your perceptions of their actions. If your friends don't really support you or invalidate you, experiment with taking the initiative to spend time with new people who attract or interest you, and reflect on how you feel after spending time with different people. Do you walk away saying, oh, that was a fun time, or do you walk away feeling like you were out of place or that you're not sharing the same values as the people you just hung out with? Then spend more time systematically with the people who make you feel the best about the experiences after the fact. The people that you felt the most comfortable with, the most kinship with, the feeling that you were with kindred spirits in hanging out. Let's look at case 3 with Ben and Cassie. With Ben, it was about how friends work things out. Ben did confront Cassie and insisted that instead of her ghosting him, I have a article on gaytherapyla.com on gay men and ghosting, so you might want to search on that on gaytherapyla.com. But instead of ignoring it, he used healthy adult communication and assertiveness to ask her why was she avoiding a long friendship that they had both invested years in. And Cassie, when pressed, angrily told Bryan that she was sick of Bryan complaining about his job, in which he was being mistreated and discriminated against for being gay. And while sympathetic in theory, she was weary of Bryan's constant complaining. Bryan was not aware that his venting about work was getting to her, and Bryan promised to focus on getting a new job and dumping his complaints on Cassie less. But Bryan was also jealous that Cassie had a new job that paid her a lot of money for not very much work, and in a much less stressful situation, and felt that Cassie, who had reportedly never experienced sexual harassment or discrimination, even as a female in the workplace, Bryan thought that Cassie was kind of privileged, grown up in a rich family and had always kind of had it easy and really never had to work full time, and Bryan was, really exhausted and being discriminated against. And, Bryan was frustrated that Cassie was privileged and just wasn't sympathetic to a gay man who was being mistreated. So eventually Bryan coped by spending more time with gay friends who kind of got it, and he changed his career to something more gay-friendly. But in this process, the years-long friendship with Cassie faded. And this friendship breakup was about changes in values over time, and also shows the importance of friends talking things out and not avoiding the hard conversations that need to happen to clear the air. There's another blog article on gaytherapyla.com that I wrote about don't avoid the hard stuff. Sometimes things that are uncomfortable are still healthy and necessary. And one of those is sometimes having hard conversations with a boss or a colleague or a neighbor or a partner or a friend. So I help clients do that. There's an assertive communication skills model that's a part of cognitive behavioral therapy. It's a 6-step process that I teach clients in my office. It's really an educational skills building experience in therapy, which, therapists do sometimes. Not all therapists, if they work from a different style, like the psychodynamic or psychoanalytic style. But other therapists like me would actually teach a special kind of skill, the 6 steps of assertive communication. And when you learn that and you practice it, it can really help clear the air. I really even role play these conversations in a session for the client to have kind of a dress rehearsal to clarify what they want to say to the other person in real life. So here's my advice on this case. Be careful not to dump on your friends too much in whining or complaining just because they are close and convenient and always seemingly understanding. If you need to vent, hire a therapist or a coach and discuss the balance between venting, getting things off your chest, and receiving validation for that, and taking purposeful action. Nothing changes if nothing changes in your thinking and your behavior and who you're surrounded by. To make real change in life, there has to be real change in how you operate. But if your friends are indifferent or invalidating when you need emotional support, be clear in what you're asking them for. Do you want a listening ear? Do you want some sound advice? Or do you just want to do something fun as a distraction from your problems? But if they are too privileged or even narcissistic to really be there as a friend for you, you might need to put energy and time and focus into identifying and cultivating new friendships with people who actually share your values. Let's talk for a minute about family of origin versus family of choice. Gay men often experience the profound value of a family of choice, meaning friends, versus their family of origin, such as parents or siblings. And while it is true that a family of origin tends to be steady over a lifetime, except for losses due to, losses, due to death of grandparents or parents, for example, the people who compromise your family of choice, that might change over time. This is why relationship with siblings are especially important in all of our lives, and These are relationships that deserve to be really worked on, because relationships with siblings arguably last a lifetime. Friendships are an extension of where we are currently living, what city, and also if we have roommates or neighbors, working, what hobbies we have, and what phase of life, what developmental stage through the lifespan we are. And just as all of these variables can change, so can the people who are the cast of characters in our lives. There's a saying that says that friendship multiply our joys and divide our sorrows. Friendships are a value-added aspect to life. It's part of living in a civilized society. So if a supposed friendship isn't working for you, such as making you doubt yourself, feel put down, or feel discouraged, it might be time to replace some of the characters in the cast of characters of your life. Friendships are a reflection of each one of us, and each friend somehow meets a need that we have in ourselves to see our own values mirrored and reflected in others. Friendships satisfy a human need that we have to run in packs like animals, and we create communities for the collective good. Think of a family of gorillas or a pride of lions. We see it all the time in the animal kingdom about how groups of similar traits, whether it's a species or whether it's a geographic area or people, we interact. The idea that no one is an island, that we live our lives in the context of interpersonal relationships with other people. And our friends help us to feel validated and confident in pursuing our lives, and then in turn we support others. And that can be with any demographic. Gay men often feel the most comfortable with other gay men, just as people from other minorities are often comfortable sharing their affinity with others in the same group. African Americans, Jewish people, Asian people, Latino people sometimes form, neighborhoods or business groups or networking groups around a common trait that builds a sense of affinity and a sense of community. But getting our needs met can also mean friendships with people very much outside our own demographic, such as having straight friends or friends who are much older or much younger, or just very different from ourselves, even if those networks change and evolve over time. So I would say keep in touch with your old friends as best you can, but realize that your day-to-day best friend might change over the years. This part of accepting the losses and transition of life, it's part of living life on life's terms and adapting and coping as we move through life's phases. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just how life evolves over a period of many years. Coping with the loss of a friendship might involve acknowledging some loss and some grief in the short term, but it can also mean that we are growing and evolving in our lives for the better. Losing one friend is about making room for another, and as I often say, can we make that okay? Can we make that okay, that sometimes our friendships change? So if you need help with the breakup or the management of a friendship or any kind of interpersonal relationship, I'd like you to consider having therapy or coaching for that. That can give you an objective perspective that helps you see these dynamics and learn about how people change over the course of life and the impact of your family of origin versus your family of choice on your values. So you're always welcome to review this podcast. We need reviews, guys. If you would like to work with me individually, I'm available in my office in Los Angeles if you're local to Southern California. Or I also work through FaceTime or Skype or over the phone to guys all over our country, places I will probably never visit, but it's kind of cool to hear about them, and in all different states, and then internationally too. We kind of have to do the math about the time zone, but I work with guys in London and France and Bangkok and Toronto and really all over. So if you're in LA, you can come see me, but then if you're somewhere else, we can always work remotely with my coaching services if that interests you and you'd like some help with something. And there's more blog articles and other information on gaytherapyla.com and also the Gay Therapy LA page on Instagram. So, thanks for listening, and we'll have another one soon. If you have suggestions for podcast episodes, feel free to email me, ken@gaytherapyla.com, or you can always call or text my cell, 310-339-5778. So 310-339-5778. It's a little faster to text me at that, actually, because I'm often in noisy places. But, if you'd like to hire me to have some help, I would be happy to help you. So, another episode soon. Thanks.